Hey guys, it's Ken again, my review for Parasite. And without getting into much, because trust me, it's very hard to talk about this movie without delving into spoilers. Basically, we focus on these two families. One is very unfinancially stable. They're living in this sort of shoebox apartment that just really isn't doing them all that well. The other is highly wealthy. And basically, the son of the poor family, he ends up getting this job where he is going to work as a tutor for this wealthy family. And the family, knowing about this, wants to try to take this to their advantage, so they sort of try to devise this scheme in which they're going to try to get closer with the wealthy family in the hopes of turning their life around, and that's really all I'm gonna say. So, Parasite, I was obviously hyped for this film, and how can I not be? I mean, everyone lately has been talking about it, saying it's the best of the year, saying it's like maybe the best of the decade. I mean, everyone has just been consistently praising it, and because of that, walking into a film like Parasite, it is very easy to be disappointed. It is very easy for a film like this to let me down because of the fact that it has been so widely praised and things like that, and it's had all this adoration and, you know, people saying, oh, it's the front runner for Best Picture and things like that. So it is easy for me to be disappointed with this film. But that's not the case here. That's not the case at all. If anything, Parasite exceeded my already very high expectations and really is that good. This is one of the best examples of a film that really is in a class of its own, that deals with some incredibly relevant and topical issues, but also is just the definition of why I love movies as much as I do. But we'll just get into right now, starting off with the cast. And look, right off the bat, everyone's great here. Everyone gives a phenomenal performance. I really do think that there isn't a single dud in this entire cast. But I think out of everyone here, which, I mean, there are a lot of actors in this movie, I think easily, though, we can all pretty much agree that the big standout has to be Kang-ho's son as our main character, Kai-tak, who I thought was phenomenal in this movie. This is a guy who is really doing whatever he can to try to provide for his family, to try to make sure that things work out for his family, but you can also see that he doesn't always do it in the most diplomatic way. He is kind of rough around the edges, and he's very erratic, and I don't want to get into it too much, but he gave a startling performance here. I mean, the transformation that this character undergoes is so well done, and again, it's a role that could be very hard to pull off, because on the surface, yes, he does come across as very welcoming and charming and things like that, but there's also a darker level hidden in the surface, and Son really does embrace that transformation so well here, but also portrays it in a very genuine way. You really do see that though this guy definitely is very, you know, definitely does act out at points, and definitely does have some sort of, you know, darker edge to him, he really is trying to provide for his family. He really is trying to do whatever he can to try to turn their life around. And I thought he did some incredible work here for sure, and probably gives one of my favorite performances of the entire year, especially one scene, and you'll know when you see it, but if he is not at the very least nominated at the Oscars, I will be very upset. It honestly, it's as much as like Yelitsa Aparicio needed to be nominated last year, which thankfully she was. If she can get nominated for Roma, I don't see why Kang-ho-san cannot be nominated for Parasite, because he really just is that good here. But aside from him, I mean, the rest of the cast, like I said, also does a really great job. Woo-shik I thought was fantastic in this movie. And again, these are not actors that I'm that familiar with, not just because they're Korean actors, but they're actors that just haven't been in a lot of things. However, Woo-shik actually has. He was in Okja. He was in a movie called Train to Busan that I've heard is really great. And he does a really great job in this movie. He kind of starts off as the main character, and really is someone who is trying to do what he can to provide for himself because he wants to be well educated and things like that, but he ends up becoming probably the single-handedly most sympathetic character of the entire movie. Where he ends up going is just phenomenal, and I think Chow overall just did such a great job portraying this character. I really loved where he ended up going. I thought he did some really great work. I really loved, I really loved Sun-kyun Lee in this movie. I thought he did a really great job. Yeo-jeong is really good. I mean, really, the entire cast does a really great job here. I do want to highlight, though, again, I know I'm probably pronouncing these names wrong, but whatever. Hyeon Jun, who plays the little boy Daesun. I have not seen this kid in anything, and I hope I do after this, because he had me absolutely dying of laughter. He's absolutely hysterical to watch. He is the son of the rich family that is just constantly acting out and doing all this outrageous shit, and he is just such a joy to watch, and I just loved him in this movie. Really ended up loving everyone. I don't really think there's a single dud in this entire cast, and honestly, it'd be hard to just go through everyone because there are so many people here, but really everyone, I think, gives some of the best performances in the entire film, and I do actually think if, you know how, like, the SAG Awards has that category for, like, Best Ensemble, best ensemble in a film, I very much do think this should go to the cast of Parasite, because I think everyone really did kill it here. But now we have to get to the directing and the writing, which, holy shit, where do we even start? I mean, Bong Joon-ho is one of those directors where he's already been put on a very deserving pedestal. He's someone who we expect a lot out of. His movies nearly always do deliver, but somehow he's topped himself. I don't know how. He's so far into his career. You would think he's already established himself. This film proves that's not really the case, because what Bong Joon-ho is able to accomplish here is nothing short of remarkable. I mean, this is a film that shouldn't work with the way it's directed, because it isn't really one consistent tone. It is an amalgamation of many things. It's a comedy at points. It's a heist film. For the first half, in fact, this is basically a heist film. It's a fun sort of dark comedy in that way, which is very shocking, but it's also a thriller. It's also a family drama. It's also even a horror movie at points. I mean, it really is in a class of its own in that way, and the way that Ho directs that here is just absolute perfection. But it's not just tonal-wise. I mean, just what he does in this movie, the passion that he put in here is just remarkable to behold. You can tell that he wanted this to be his magnum opus. He did everything that he possibly could to make this be the movie that he is best remembered for, and I think he did an excellent job with that here, and I don't think it's going to happen. I would love for it to happen, but I would love to see Bong Joon-ho get an Oscar nomination for Best Director, because I think what he did here is just incredible, and it's something that most directors wouldn't be able to pull off. But you have someone like Ho, who is just so confident in what he does and is just very specific with what he wanted to do, and I think overall just had some of the best directing of the entire year. But his screenplay is really one that I want to talk about, because this, forget what I said about The Lighthouse, this is the best screenplay of the entire year. And then you might hear me say that a lot, throughout the end of the year. That typically ends up happening where I'm like, oh, this is the best performance of the year. No, this is the best performance of the year. No, this is the best screenplay of the year. But I mean it. It's going to be very hard for a film to top Parasite, because, one, I mean, the dialogue here, there are so many just quotable lines in this movie that I think so many people are going to be talking about. But it's the story. It's the story of this film that is so engrossing, and one that I legitimately do see becoming a classic. This is the kind of screenplay that I can see people in, like, film school having to dissect for years to come, because there's so much to love about this story. Because, yes, ostensibly, it is just about two families, and them, basically, sort of like, them trying to, get into the good graces of this one family, and the poor family trying to, attempt to strike it rich and things like that. But it's far more than that. This is a film that is primarily about the class system, and we've had many films about that this year. The film behind me, Joker, very much covered that. Us, earlier in the year, definitely covered that. But those two films did it a lot differently than Parasite did. While Joker and Us explored the idea that people who are, lower class are frequently disregarded by society and are almost lambasted at, Parasite goes even further. It's not just that message, because yes, that is very prevalent. I mean, constantly throughout the film, we have this one family basically putting themselves into positions, but they're not very well liked. And constantly, this family is very much made fun of. They are definitely put down by the Park family. They don't take them very seriously. They don't treat them as equals. And yes, that is a very big part of this movie. But it also is trying to be a critique. It's showing that while there are, definitely things to like about this family, they're not always on the right side of things. They have this desire where, and many people do. Many people have this desire where, oh, we're going to become rich. We're going to become, very wealthy and things like that, and we're going to get everything we want. But this film is kind of trying to show that's not all it's cracked up to be. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. There's a lot more that this family has to deal with that they're not expecting, and the ramifications of what they end up getting themselves involved in is a really big part of this film. And again, I think that just shows how great of a screenplay this really is, because it's not really choosing a side here. Like I said, it's more of just a discussion and a critique on the pros and cons of both. We get to see how both families are, we get to see how they operate, but we also get to see the similarities in them, even though, yes, the Park family is far more wealthy than the Kim family. There are definitely a lot of similarities there, and we really do see that throughout this entire film, and I really did love the way that the film did get into that and what it has to say about class discussion, but also on the idea, like I said, of just a dream that we all want to achieve, but it not being as realistic. And that's the thing about this film, is that it goes about things in a very realistic way. Like I said, the first half of this movie is gonna throw some people off, because it very much is just a fun comedy. I was laughing a lot in this movie, way more than I was expecting to, but it really is very funny in that way. In fact, this film is probably one of the funniest films of the entire year. There's a great scene, especially involving this peach, and I don't want to get into it too much more, but goddamn was it hysterical, and stuff like that. I mean, it's so well handled in that way, and again, a lot of the humor is not just things characters will say, it's just the way that they go about it, because it feels very real in that sense, and again, ties into that idea of things feeling just really fun and, just bouncy at first, but then eventually getting a lot more serious, and things even like the peach does get a lot more serious after a while, and I think they handled that really well here. And it's actually a very fun film, but eventually it takes a turn, and when it takes that turn, you'll know it when you see it. That's when you realize just how great this film really is, because that's when they really get into the nitty-gritty of what this family is really getting themselves involved in, and I feel like this is how this situation would end up playing out, and it's devastating to behold, for sure, but it feels very realistic in that way. It feels like this is how, like I said, something like this would happen, and I think all of that is so well done here, but also just these characters alone. I mean, the film does a great job with presenting these characters, their wants and needs, the kind of things that they want to do, but also the limitations that they have. I mean, the character of, say, Kai-woo, for example, this is someone who he really wants to go to college. He is very smart in that way. He is constantly, like, trying to study and things like that. He really is a very intelligent kid, but he doesn't have the money. He doesn't have, what he needs to be able to get into a college, and he ends up taking on this job just as a pathway. He wants this to be a start. He wants to get there, and you see what he has to do so, but at the same time, that plan might not always work out in the way that he wanted to. There might be some things along the way, which again, I'd love to get into this more, but trust me, this is a film that's very hard to talk about without spoilers, just because of what ends up really going down here. But let's just say, his dreams are not achieved in the way that he wants them to, and that's the same for many of these characters here, and For many, that could end up being very jarring, but I think the way that Ho goes about it, it just feels very raw in that way. And he's not trying to shy away from anything. He's not trying to glamorize it. And I think that's a big part of this movie. We will often glamorize a certain dream that we have, and we don't think of the negative, repercussions that could occur. But we get to see in this film that there are very significant things that could occur. And we see that happen throughout this movie, and it just becomes more and more devastating as it goes on. But it also becomes incredibly thrilling, especially after a certain point that, again, I'd love to talk about more, but there's just so much to love about the screenplay. The directions that it takes, the places it goes. I mean, it's also a film that's going to elicit so many reactions out of you. Like I said, I was laughing hysterically at one point, had a huge smile on my face, and then in the second half ended up devastated. There was one scene especially that honestly did have me on the verge of tears, and I realized just how connected I was to these people, because none of these characters feel like that. They feel like real people. This feels very similar to what certain people that are, less fortunate, what they end up going through. Because yeah, the movie does take place in Korean, but I think Ho made a very wise choice in making it so, yes, while the movie is clearly in China, it could be anywhere. It really could. I mean, the things that the characters say, the situations that they're in are very similar to that of today. And I think that's something that really is going to stand the test of time with this film, and I think because of that, it's destined to become a classic in this way. I've heard many people say this, but I will agree. I think this is a film that years from now, people are going to be saying is like a definitive film of this decade. I can definitely see that happening, and a lot of that really is due to the screenplay here, which is just absolutely masterful. And again, I could honestly do a whole, 20-minute video on just how great the screenplay was, but I'm gonna try to, refrain from that, because I'm very much rambling now, and honestly, I'm not even doing the screenplay justice. Like, that's how great of a screenplay it really is. That's how great of a film it really is. I'm just not really doing it justice at all, but there's just so much to love here. There's so much to dissect. It's such a heavy work in that way, and it's one where you genuinely don't know where it's gonna go. It's such an unpredictable movie, but what it has to say about the class system, the social divide, but again, also as a critique of, these two systems, I think it's just genius, and I love the way that was done. The cinematography in this film, though, holy shit, is it incredible. I mean, this is such a visceral film. There are a lot of visual cues that really do stick out, and the house that the Kims live in, but also the one that the Parks live in, are really characters of their own. For the Kims, the house represents their struggle. This is something that they want to get out of. It's kind of the thing that is keeping them from doing anything. They always blame the house that they're living in. Oh, once we'll get out of the house, we won't have to deal with this anymore. Once we're able to get somewhere else, we'll be on a better path. And for the Parks, this house represents their wealth. It represents how free they really do feel. But it also very much works as a temptation. It's something that the Kims are enticed by. They want to get into this house because, oh, it looks a lot better. It looks like something that is going to help them out. It's just like when you see an ad on the TV for, some sort of product, and it looks really enticing, and it's just something that you really want to get, and you're like, what? And you look at this ad and you're like, wow, this actually looks really great. I really want to buy this. It's something that looks like would be very efficient. But then when you end up getting it, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And the house, again, without spoiling much, which I really want to talk more, but I'm trying to keep this as minimal as possible. It's very much like this. I know that's a weird analogy, but trust me, when you see the movie, it'll make a lot more sense for sure. The house really is a character of its own, and I think it's genius the way that Ho went about it. But there's so many shots in this movie that I think are so great, and definitely ones that are going to be in my mind forever. One in particular that I can't get into, it's a heavy spoiler, but I am genuinely shocked that it went the way it did. I mean, I was not expecting them to go in the place it did, but the cinematography really just heightened this scene overall, and I think they did an excellent job with that here. So many just great shots in this film, and I really did love the cinematography and the score as well. This is such a fantastic score because, again, like the movie, it starts off and it's very fun. It's very inviting in that way, but it gets a lot more haunting and devastating as it goes on. And again, similar to the cinematography, it's kind of a character of its own in that way. And I think the score, it's one of those scores where like you can listen to it on its own and you're gonna feel those same emotions, even when you're not watching the movie. And that's when you know you've constructed a really great score. And I think the score that was in this film is easily one of my favorites of the entire year. In fact, after watching this movie, I went back and I listened to a few tracks from it, but Jun Jae-hill's score is masterful, and I really loved the way the score was composed here. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year for sure. And the editing, this film is perfectly paced, even though, yes, it is 2 hours and 12 minutes. There's not a single second that you feel the runtime. There's always something happening. There's always something that is keeping you invested. There's always something where I was just glued to the screen the entire time, whether it was something just really funny, whether it was something that I thought was handy, something that I thought was really devastating. There was always something to keep you invested, and I don't think there was a single scene wasted, including an ending that was truly one of the most devastating of the entire year, but also maybe my favorite of the entire year, that really left me just absolutely stunned. And I know that sounds very hyperbolic, like, oh, this film just left me at a loss for words, but it legitimately did. Like, walking out of this movie, it was honestly indescribable. It was hard for me to fully process what I had watched, but letting it sink in and thinking about it hours after I have seen it, this is a film that I just absolutely adore. Parasite is the kind of movie that just reminds me why I love cinema as much as I do. It's a fantastic social commentary on the class system, but also the social divide and the, pros and cons of that. It also is uproariously funny at points. It's very sad. It's devastating. It's emotional. It's heartbreaking. It's thrilling. It's riveting. It's horrifying at points. And by all accounts, it is truly a great film that I do think is one of the best of the entire decade. It's easily one of the best of the entire year and truly is as good as everyone has said it is. And like I said, even though Bong Joon-ho was already on a pedestal, I think this puts him even further on a pedestal. I've heard people say that this film, is the front runner for Best Picture, and I honestly really hope it does, because it really does deserve it. Guys, Parasite blew me away in more ways than I really could have imagined. It's a film that truly is as good as everyone has said, and so obviously I am definitely going to give Parasite overall an A+. Look, I know a lot of people are very much turned off by foreign films because, oh, you gotta read subtitles and things like that, but I assure you, you cannot escape this film. You cannot skip this one. This is one that you need to see as soon as possible. Trust me, Parasite is worth every second of your time, and I'm just really happy at the amount of, just the amount of, clout this film has been getting, the amount of recognition that it's getting. It's rare that I see a foreign film come to, even a few theaters. I see foreign films in very few theaters. It's rare that I see a foreign film expanding this much. And the fact that it just shows how special it is. Guys, this is one you truly can't miss, and one that I just can't wait to talk more at length about. Honestly, I do want to talk about this movie again. I want to go more into spoilers and things like that, but I really didn't want to in this video because I want you guys to go into this knowing as little as possible, and trust me, if you do, it very much will pay off. But either way, guys, this is my review of Parasite. Let me know what you guys saw this movie overall. Left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.